welcome to another Q&A session. This Q&A session is for Ena Sendijarević's film Take Me Somewhere Nice, a film that we are incredibly excited to feature in this year's festival. My name is Ena Sendijarević, and I am one of the co-programmers of the festival. My fellow co-programmer is Amir Husak, who is now going to introduce himself. Amir.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another one in a series of our conversations with the filmmakers. We're really excited that you are able to join us. I'm just going to give you some rules about the Q&A. So Diana and I will be leading a conversation with our dear guest, Ena Sendijarević, as you know. However, you are also able to ask us questions or ask questions for Ena. Post your questions for Ena in the chat box in the Eventive stream. So please feel free to add those questions, and we will collect them and share them during the Q&A. Now I'm going to officially introduce our guest today, Ena Sendijarević. She's an Amsterdam-based Boston filmmaker. She studied film studies at the University of Amsterdam and the Vrije Universiteit Berlin before graduating from the Netherlands Film Academy as a writer-director in 2014. She directed several successful short films like Travelers into the Night in 2013, Fernweh in 2014, and her short film Import in 2016 premiered at the Quinzaine des Réalisateurs at Cannes Festival in 2016 and traveled to numerous other festivals ever since. The film was also her official Dutch short film entrance for the Oscars in 2017. Ena's debut feature film, Take Me Somewhere Nice, the film that we feature here at the festival, has screened at numerous festivals around the world to critical acclaim and received numerous awards. Welcome, Ena.
Hello.
Hello, Ena.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing relatively good, actually. Yeah, I'm calling now from Syracuse in Sicily at the moment. I think you have a neighborhood in New York as well that's called Syracuse, right? I'm not sure. I think it's in Little Italy. Yeah, so I feel a bit connected to wherever you are. But yeah, I'm doing good. I'm in the writing residency now, and it's 11 o'clock in the evening here.
Well, that's wonderful. Oh, I actually assumed you were in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands somewhere. So it's interesting to learn where you are and what you're doing next. In the US, I believe they pronounce it Syracuse. And
maybe yes. Yes, I'm here in the original place, Syracuse.
It's the small differences, but all of us who are kind of occupying various simultaneous positions when it comes to ethno-national belonging are kind of used to these small differences. But welcome. We are absolutely delighted to have you here to feature your film in the festival. Your film, this is your feature narrative debut. Is an incredibly acclaimed film. It won the Rotterdam International Film Festival Special Jury Award for exceptional artistic achievement. And it also won the main award, the Heart of Sarajevo, from our sister festival, Sarajevo Film Festival, last year, which is incredibly poignant and amazing. And I just wanted to read a little quote from the jury statement from that win, where they said the film is beautifully photographed, acted, scripted, and directed, and it was praised for its ability to capture the spirit of modern youth while at the same time feeling timeless. So there's something about the coming of age films or the adolescence turning to mature adulthood that captures cinematic imagination over and over again, and you are added to the canon of people who have achieved this in really poignant ways. So congratulations, and we're really happy to have your film and have you here. So my first question would be, where did the idea for this film come from? How did the germ come about? Because we should mention that you also wrote the screenplay for the film.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's always a difficult question, in the sense that I feel like it came from many different places. So depending on when you ask that question, I think I probably give a different answer. But for now, I would say that I wanted to do something with a new generation that I was observing, and that I'm also partly part of, a generation of people who are growing up in this very globalized world, in this digital era, where connections are made very easily and where distances seem to have vanished. I mean, look at us now talking, and I think maybe the Corona situation made this even worse, or even more profoundly so. But at the same time, borders and the places where we are and our nationalities are also undeniable, and the privileges they bring with them. So the place where you are born and where you are based, and where you got your papers and your passports, also has a very big influence on your life. So I think this is kind of a schizophrenic in betweenness that I found there, and that I'm struggling with myself. And when I found this idea of in-betweenness, then I was I started looking for in different ways in which this in-betweenness would be tangible in a way. And so this is why I also decided to fixate my gaze to this in-between state of childhood and adulthood as well. You mentioned already that I am playing with this coming of age genre, although I would say that it's not like a very clear coming of age story where in the end the character has become sadder but wiser and is ready to make the first steps into society. For me, actually, this in-between area of childhood and adulthood is a very scary area because I feel in puberty, and this is also how I felt with my actress and hanging about with the young actors as well. I feel that this is actually very much a moment of pureness. I don't see people in these teenage years as crazy, rebellious people. I think there's a lot of cleverness there, because there's still this open mindset of being a child and taking life as it is. And then there's also this vision of, okay, society and how it looks like. And also how society is sometimes very corrupted and not a very safe place to go into. So I thought it was interesting to play a bit with this coming of age genre, not to see it as a place where it's where one, adulthood being a goal where one should want to go to. No, also to question this open childhood being molded into society that maybe is not always constructed in a way that is good for us. So these are all thoughts that I wanted to pour in this film in a way, and many more actually. Yeah.
Thank you for this wonderful and insightful answer, because that is very evident in your film, that adolescence is not something to necessarily just simply get through and get to a certain kind of closure. And your film very much denies that sense of the closure, because that is often the approach to adolescence in cinema and more generally in cultural, societal conversation. This is just this in-between period between being a child and being an adult and getting somewhere. And that in-betweenness at the same time overlaps very clearly with a sense of being in between nations, in between belonging to certain communities, that is evident with your protagonist. And this is something, if I may speak on behalf of our festival, that is our shared experience as well, being expats, New Yorkers who identify as Bosnians or Yugoslavs in New York City or in this country. So this perpetual in-betweenness and how we position not just ourselves personally, but the festival itself as well. So we're always welcome so much the films that articulate those kinds of struggles from very insightful points of view. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think this in-betweenness is actually something that is so much, it's everywhere actually in the world. And I think, I really wanted, in one way, I really wanted to tell this story that was specifically two countries in the background, Bosnia-Herzegovina on the one side and the Netherlands, which is a Western European, very neoliberal country with a long empirical past behind it. It's and one of the countries that it's very much on the forefront in the European Union, and then another country that is part of Europe but not part of the European Union, as one of the only countries that has this position. So I did think that there were a lot of things specifically interesting about these two countries. At the same time, I also thought, yes, but it should be a film that is universal. And I think there's just, maybe we are the majority, maybe the people who are dislocated and who have, several different, cultural backgrounds. Maybe we are not schizophrenic, maybe we are normal. And maybe it's time to not treat these stories and ourselves as something very specific and very small. I think this was also was my endeavor, just to make it as something very normal. Actually, maybe it's very special when you only have like a very clear. I don't know many people who have lived their whole life in one place for generations long. I think they are becoming the minority, actually. Yeah.
And that's a good point, and I also like how what you just said, that the film can be also understood as a sort of a universal way. And there, when I was thinking about it, when I watched it a second time, I realized that there are so many different interpretations we can have when we're watching this film, because there are these interesting sort of also tensions in the film between obviously the adulthood and adolescence, between Bosnia and Netherlands, between a variety of different ideas and constructs that exist surrounding that. But what I find also very fascinating, and I would maybe like you to maybe say a few words about that, is that there is this haunting past that your protagonist sort of revisits in a sense, but we don't know if it's in an effort to bury the past, to understand the past, or because the body of the dead father and all these sort of symbolic and really strong images that kind of permeate your film, and they're present all over. So if you could maybe speak about those tensions, because your protagonist is someone who's born after the war, and yet the war is present throughout the film in these really kind of subtle ways. So when you were writing, or even when you were shooting, if you could comment on those concerns and the way you were thinking when you were making the film.
Yes. So for me it was important to I mean, there's a little bit of difference between the generation of the people that I'm talking about in the film, which is a post-war generation. They have been born after the war. You know, if it's Bosnian people, it's always before, after the war, or during the war. It's always, you know, I was born before the war. I was born in Bosnia, and we went to Germany first and then to the Netherlands. So I felt like I myself have a bit of a different position also towards the war and the country. But I could imagine and relate very well to this post-war generation as too. I really wanted to dive into their reality, also to see what are, you know, what is the vision of, you know, the future, their future? What is happening right now if we just don't look at the reasons why we are where we are? So what are the problems and that these people are dealing with at this moment, being young? And when you're young, you don't, even me, the war is not something that I used to discuss a lot, also with my parents or with my sister. It was just there, and you wouldn't go into the details too much. And I somehow wanted to have these characters that would be also just young in a way and not so aware of everything that was happening. Maybe being driven by things that teenagers are driven by anywhere, you know, and not be defined by what a victim should look like. But then, yeah, maybe on more, the war is just something that you cannot, you cannot, it's impossible not to, it's impossible to skip it altogether. So you just can't, you know, and I couldn't. So I had some references to, you know, like somebody would talk about the singer, for example, would talk about where she was during the war, or you would feel it in the air, also in this sense of alienation, and I think also in the sense of the country still being wounded. But yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, and it almost adds to these, as you mentioned earlier, it adds to these kind of schizophrenic states where you need to talk about the war, but you also at the same time you don't want to, or you kind of don't know where to start. And plus these other sort of ideas of like of identity and belonging. Where am I? Am I in Netherlands, or am I in Bosnia, or in the Balkans in general? So a variety of different kind of polarities emerge throughout. And I kind of remembered, actually, even after watching your film, it was like this idea of like home. And I think it was an Egyptian filmmaker who mentioned that home is not where you were born. Home is where all of your attempts to escape cease. So,
wow.
Which I really liked, and I kind of, after watching your film, I kind of remember that, because it was sort of, your protagonist seemed to carry that weight and the impossibility of both. And I'm curious also with Sarah Luna Zoric, right? The main actress in your film. Can you tell me a little bit about your work with her? Because she kind of embodies these feelings as well in a very interesting way. And I imagine it was a rather kind of a complicated and a very intimate process also to transfer to translate the script onto the screen, really, and working with her. Could you tell us a little bit more, maybe even about your audition with her?
Yeah. Yes. So acting-wise, I think it was a very difficult film for everyone who was involved, basically, because what I tried to do was not to make a social realistic film. So it's, like you have these films that almost look like documentaries, and they're so real. And I wanted to dive into different kind of worlds and try to see more the world as a construction than as, me lying basically that I'm telling the truth. Because I'm a fiction filmmaker and also documentary. A filmmaker is always manipulating, and they are giving a version of the truth. So I thought I would like to be transparent about this. And one of the tools that I use to do this is to make their acting. I wanted to make it a bit stylized. They call it, I think, they call it like this Brechtian acting, basically. So just to have like, when you just lower your mimics down, then your words also become a bit alienated. And alienation was also a big part of the storytelling. So this was in the acting process, I think this was the most difficult thing, because Sara Luna is a very lively girl. So she's moving around all bubbly, and but somehow I also feel like she had a lot of depth and a lot of pain inside her as well, not in a very evident way. And I think this is, maybe this also connects to your previous question, because I think it's the Native Americans who said acts of violence always last 4 generations before recovery. And I heard this one time and I thought it was very beautiful, which she would be 2nd generation, and I think she's born in the Netherlands, but I somehow could feel that she had some kind of heaviness also around her, and this is what attracted me to her, basically, because she would be this bubbly person that would also have something heavy. When she came to the audition, I felt, she was way too late. She was half an hour late, and she came with these big bags because she was going to a music festival. Uh-huh. So in a way, it looked like she couldn't care less, which is for a director always attractive, like at least for me. I like the hard to get kind of actors, So, and then in the process of us being on the set and also with the actors, I think I gave them a bit of a hard time, and I'm so happy that they endured, because they had to strip down everything all the time, all the emotions, and sometimes we would try different extremes, like very, very robotic to they could do it a bit more lively. And I think what in the end, for some people it works, for other it doesn't. So it's also a matter of taste if you go into this kind of cinema. But if you do, and I like it, not only in this film, but I like it in general in other films as well. But I think it shows something, instead of acting with the face and trying to communicate through everything you have. I think when you strip it down, it becomes more, I don't know, it becomes more pure.
Yeah, and it adds certain complexity to the character in a way that we keep kind of wondering what is on her mind or what is on his mind, because we're not reading much on the face, which I thought it was like, so that's interesting. It's great to know that this was your method, because it really added complexity, and was constantly wondering and trying to position the understand where our protagonist really is, because sometimes it seems so dispassionate, like that she's not invested at all.
Yeah, this is what actually I wanted to build upon further, because for the first 2/3 of the film, I even want to say she seems very disconnected, and sort of like there's a lot of flat affect. There's a slow sense of some kind of warmth building up between the three young protagonists, an occasional sense that they care about one another, but it's still cautious, and there's still sort of a sense of distrust of who wants what and what is happening. And your film at the same time is sort of a road film. There's many forms of road films, and this is a road film in a way, and I think that really connects well with what you were just describing, of kind of looking for those sorts of connections and looking for where one really stands with respect to these identity categories, or what they want from the world and from life, and what is the goal of the journey. If the life itself is a journey, what is the goal of such a journey? And in the microcosm of a film that is a road film, what is that? And it can at times feel aimless, but then you capture these beautiful little moments where suddenly things cohere in interesting ways between the three characters, or one or two out of three in different combinations, and so on and so forth. And so working with them, I was thinking, as it was developing as a road movie that felt really in an amazing way difficult to predict where it was going to go, what next surprise, tender surprise, is going to lay in front of us, whether it's a little dog appearing, or sadly hitting a dog on the road, or not really finding the father, or finding him too late, and the symbolism of the suitcase not being able to be open, and then it's lost, and then it's the wrong suitcase. So my question was about the script. Was the script completely set as you went into filming, or was it a work in progress and sort of improvising with the sort of situation that you were finding in collaboration with the actors and with the environment that you were interacting with?
Well, I think that's one of the benefits of being the writer as well, is that you can keep on working on the screenplay until the very last moment. And so actually the story was actually set, but definitely I just in the weeks of preparation and seeing locations, and all those, doing rehearsals with the actors. If something comes up, I'm gonna get it, and I'm gonna put it, in the film. For example, one of the locations of the magic show in the hotel in the end, which was some kind of weird wedding location around Mostar, where we looked for another scene actually, and when we were there, I rewrote the scene with the magician. So I tried to pick up things along the road, but at the same time we couldn't improvise, because the way that the story is told is very stylized. So then you really, all the sets are, a lot of the sets are very much, they're built and prepared, and we never could move the camera a little bit more, because then the set would stop, So these things are very controlled. So this makes the room for inspiration a bit smaller. But overall, indeed, I try to add things that I find exciting. And also for me, it was important that the film would not be like some kind of studio film, some kind of like a film concept that's already fixed. You have person A, person B, and they have a goal, and then the goal is achieved. I thought it would be more interesting to have things that surprise you, not only just because being surprised is nice, but also because I think that's where the power of cinema is, in that space where you can actually go against certain kind of numbing things, or just numbing films that just make you disconnect with your brain and your senses.
And playing, I guess, certain kinds of conventions that have already been tried and true. In some ways, your film keeps us on our toes. It is a quiet film, a tender film, but at the same time, it keeps one on their toes in this really deeply existential way. If I can speak as a person who studies films and analyzes films quite a bit, and all of that, those are these small movements that you add into this conversation or into this film canon or coming of age or exploring these in-between categories while also on the road, which is this malleable category. And that actually something that caught my eye, and again harkens back to experiences that resonate with a lot of us, and it's something that really interests me more broadly than just Bosnian cinema and expat Bosnian cinema. Is you said in one of your interviews that the questions that you were wrestling with, among others, were who is telling whose story, that was important to you. This became a very important question for you during the making of the film, because when you were shooting in Bosnia, sometimes you became scared of touching upon certain problems in Bosnian society, and you would question yourself as kind of an outsider. So this question of legitimacy of, who gets to represent certain things. Do I have the right to do that or not? Do you want to say more about that? Because I think it's a very poignant struggle to have, that you negotiate in your film really powerfully.
Yes, I think that's a very good question. I think this was a big struggle when I was making the film. Now I think it is less of a struggle now that it's finished, and I managed to kind of move on. And now actually telling a story about Dutch colonialism, which is like where this question becomes even more interesting, I think. No, I mean specifically in Bosnia, of course. I think maybe this connects also with what you were saying before about the faces and the tension and the coldness between the people. I think there's actually this image of Bosnia being, and I know this Bosnia as well, and Bosnia-Herzegovina as well, this very warm place. And I know that people can be very warm and generous towards each other. That's also part of the culture. And most people that will go there will see this part of our culture, which is a beautiful part. But yes, there's also this other other thing that's very much under the table, and that nobody can ever talk about. And that's also this tension between the people that left and the people that stayed, basically. And even if you were too young to choose which one of these positions you would take, you also have this burden of it. And I think this is the tension that was present in the film, because Alma has the Dutch passport and her cousin and his best friend don't. So immediately there's like kind of political tension between them, even if they have absolutely nothing they can do about this situation. It's this difference in privilege, as they call it, but one might ask, is it such a privilege to live in a country that is not, where you don't feel like it's yours? So this question about privilege is also, I think, you can turn it around in a way. But me being in Bosnia and shooting was definitely one of the things that was for me heavy, was this question, yes, was this tension between me having left the country, have grown up in the Netherlands and now coming back to shoot a film. Did I have this right? And now I think, of course, why wouldn't I? I mean, not even only because I was born there, even if I wasn't born there, I mean, the world is a place for everyone. And as long as you come with genuine feelings and you want to do something that's genuine, that's what I wanted to do, then the life after the film will decide itself whether it's an important work or just shit that everybody forgets immediately. Let fate decide in that sense. But this tension is just present. It's present there, and it was present for me as a filmmaker too. But I think just to add to that, it is a complex question because, I mean, of course, now you also have this hashtag own story. And I think there's a duality there, on the one hand, I'm so happy that people that have always been in minority and always been pushed away now have like a chance to, get some strength with these kind of hashtags and like a political way, like, okay, I'm going to tell my story. On the other hand, I think somebody who, a good storyteller can dive into different heads, and this has been proven in so many films. So there's a duality there, and I think it can be a good thing, but I think it can also be a good thing to just make something that's not your own story and maybe have a bit of a distance to be able to see things that somebody who is in there cannot see.
Absolutely. Thank you. If I can just quickly follow up, and then I'll turn over
yes,
to
please.
Thank you for this poignant answer, because this is really become kind of a reductive conversation in many ways in the United States in particular, and by all means, we need to acknowledge the power dynamics of who gets to tell whose stories and on what terms, and acknowledge that there has been centuries and generations of people who have not been able, in many parts of the world, including this country and including Bosnia, not being able to tell their stories on their own terms. But at the same time, it cannot be the binary where we cannot speak for these in-betweener experiences where we're kind of both and standing in the middle ground somewhere, or what you just said, this insightful seeing of things from a distance, that someone who is kind of looking at things from too close of a proximity cannot necessarily see. And there's many evidence in cinema history of exactly that being done. It's really about intent, and it's really about the openness and the sensitivity to the complexity of what is being seen and depicted. And so I was just really inspired and glad to see in your film, but also read in what you have said about the film, that this was part of your thinking in approach in the film. It really shines through in what you have achieved with it. So thank you for this amazing answer in elaborating on that. Amir, you wanted to ask?
Sure. Yes. We have one question from the audience that was just emailed to us. I'm going to also ask that, but maybe first, because we're still talking about this, I would maybe like to ask you about, because you just mentioned your next project, or the film that you're working on is a film that deals with Dutch colonialism, and specifically, so I assume Indonesia.
Yes.
So, and then again, these questions like who tells which stories and so on. Can you speak about? You don't have to reveal too much of this film because we're anticipating it. But could you tell us a little bit, and if this film somehow links to Take Me Somewhere Nice in some ways?
Definitely. Yeah, I think the idea of the film started during the shooting of Take Me Somewhere Nice, where I was there with my Dutch part of the crew, some of them people that I've been working with also on some of my short films, most of them young or people that I've been studying with as well at the Dutch Film Academy, and then there was this of course Bosnian or ex-Yugoslavian part of the crew. And as I was observing the two and the dynamics there, and also there are power dynamics very much, to be seen and to be felt. I, especially looking at, young Western European people and young Balkan people, it felt very I had some difficulties with that. It felt like there was some kind of course there is a certain how do you say this disbalance in opportunity and in wealth, basically economic wealth, and I started just to ask myself these questions, like how come, why is this imbalance there? How can it be? It's not because of the war or it's a long history, and where did this history of imbalance start, basically? And why is it so that we see things that come from the West as always automatically better than, or the capitalist West, so to say, as automatically better than ideas and attitudes that come from different places in the world. So asking this question also led me just to history and looking at, okay, what is this period of time where the Netherlands had such a kickstart of the rest of the world? There must have been I know that how the Netherlands started was actually, it was a country that was it wasn't even a country. It was like just a piece of mud next to Germany, basically. I mean, a lot of places started like this, but it was during the 1700, 1800, 1900s, where the country got very wealthy and it was all based on violence in different parts of the world. And Indonesia being one of those parts. Of course, there's also this connection between Indonesia and Bosnia, and the connection is that they were both part of this non-aligned movement, which all these countries that actually decided we are not going to be part of this imperialistic West, we are not going to be part of Russia, and we're not going to be part of these big power battles where we are actually all victims of. We are, we are not going to accept this kind of narrative, and we are going to form a bloc. So Asian countries, African countries, and South American countries and Yugoslavia, they all came together and you know, started. This whole period became very interesting to me. Let's put it like this. And this is why I'm now. I started researching it, and now I'm making a film about. A sugar plantation in Indonesia, a Dutch sugar plantation, where people are going crazy. Basically, that's the story.
Yeah, but that's. I mean, it's. I'm super excited about this film specifically because you just mentioned also the non-aligned movement. In a sense, I was like, wow, you know, and all this time I'm thinking like how so many people do not know about the history of a non-aligned movement, and what an amazing project that, you know, high aspirations obviously that was. So I'm going to switch and read our audience questions. This is from John Jury. The ending of this beautiful film juxtaposes in time senseless random brutality and tender intimacy. Can you comment on this ending relative to any of the themes that are sustained by the overarching journeys of these characters, or perhaps to the title? Here, John is writing from New York.
Yes, the ending is I must say, a part that I can't talk too much about, because I've done so previously, and then I kind of later on felt that I destroyed it. But obviously it's about sexuality and violence. You know, we had earlier in this film, I mean, the film also deals with this tension between masculinity and femininity. And I think, and as we see now, there are so many different attitudes towards this tension and this balance in the world, and have been also in history. I mean, right now, looking at a situation in the US, of course, with Trump on one side, but also, you know, all these, this evening actually in Warsaw, all these Polish women going, and men too, going outside on a strike against this prohibition on abortion, which is of course crazy. But yes, in some countries, feminism being like widely accepted. In the Balkans, there's another layer there. And at a certain point in the film, this boy, Denis and Alma, are talking about, you know, whether a man should be able to protect a woman or not. If this is something that would be part of the job of the man. And in the end, obviously, he can't, basically. I mean, when it comes to muscular power, which is sadly still part of the, you know, the muscular power is still a threat in the world. We haven't moved past that, even if we live in a digital age. So yeah, I wanted to touch upon that, and then thereafter, I wanted to round up that line of masculinity and femininity and that tension, and thereafter it was more a conclusion that has to do with, for me, with her connection to the country. And I wanted to make this very, very kind of almost animal, really much about the body itself. So not anymore about thoughts and words, but just very like something that you can, that makes us human, basically, which is also our sexuality. So it was for me something that I thought would give a certain depth to explaining something about her connection to that country and the way she embraces it. which is in a very carnal way, almost very very much through the body and through our womanhood also.
Absolutely, carnal and raw. That violence in the final section of the film comes on very abruptly with the beating up. It is harrowing, but in a sense, it's also not complete surprise. And I can also connect it to something you've said earlier in our conversation, which is, the typical standard conversations about, everyone in Bosnia is so nice, which is not to say people aren't nice, but that violence does occur as anywhere, and that here it occurs over this tiny transgression of stepping onto these little beach beds or whatever they are, and suddenly become this really serious threat, so much so that she has to run into the water with carrying her little dog, and you really worry about how I in a sense was viscerally afraid for her safety with respect to how in what way she will be assaulted, and then that sort of comforting, completely silent except for sort of these bodily sighs, a scene of physical comfort, and the ending of it with her in the water and washing her intimate parts. So it's kind of a non-closure, open-ended, but also very poetic with respect to having, even through that, going through that violence and experiencing it or witnessing it and having to comfort someone who had just gone through it, something comforting about it happens. So putting the definitive interpretation or meaning into it seems something counterintuitive, right? It's a beautiful shot, and very open-ended, as is the case. And again, I'm going to go back to the road movies. Something about the road movie as a genre it just lends itself to that kind of open-endedness. We're always on the road and always traveling to find what happens, and this is what happens for these young characters, because they don't fully come of age at the end of the film. So we'll see what we can imagine. We can project our own desires and our own experiences and thoughts. But that threat of violence was really devastating nevertheless, really devastating to behold, because it is something that is very visceral for a lot of us, for many different reasons.
We have another.
If I can just comment on that, on violence, yeah. I think, it was very important for me to make this violence very absurd. So because this is my attitude towards violence in general, I don't think it has to be a part of our lives, and I think a lot of people reflecting on the war, looking at, in general, also reflecting on a war, is that they look at it and think it's absurd. It makes no sense. And this is why I can't see these war movies that are glorifying violence and making it like a cause and effect kind of story, where the violence is like an evident part of a story. Like, yes, of course there's violence because this and this and this and this and this happened. No, this is not at all how it works. When violence takes place, and unfortunately I think you cannot be a living person on this earth having come to a grown age without experiencing it. You are kind of shocked by it when you are an empathetic human being. And I think in cinema we should treat violence much more often with this feeling of bewilderment and just an absurdist view on violence, because it never makes sense. It never makes sense to be violent. It shouldn't. So yeah, so this is for me why it was important just to, out of nowhere, have these ridiculous guys come on the set, almost like a Deus ex machina, and suddenly they ruin everything, basically. And just to mock them, I want to mock, you know, these bodybuilding kind of macho guys who are not only ruining other people's lives, but also their own. Because it's not nice to be in that kind of body either. Yeah, that was important.
They might think it's really nice to be in that body.
You think it's nice to be in that body?
No, I'm saying they might think. They might think.
Yeah, then we show them the reality. It can be so much better.
Yeah, you showed them.
So wrong. we have another question. This was what came through the email, and this is from Alma, and I assume Alma is a filmmaker, because she's asking, how long did it take you to make this film, both production and how much did you spend in post-production, actually editing, obviously, right?
I think we made the film all in all in 3 years. Yeah. So from the start of the writing until the end, and I'm a bit in that sense, I really love to, you know, work like this. So you have these filmmakers who can have all these balls in the air and do different things in between, and I'm like, I have to just do one thing and then you know, finish it, yeah, I think all in all it was 3 years from starting to write and getting the financing together to delivering the film and having the premiere. So which is a relatively short period of time, I think, for a film.
For a feature-length film, especially. Yeah. First, for a young filmmaker debut feature-length film, this is going to be our final question, and it's a kind of nice way to round it out. We cannot wait to see what you do next, and we are incredibly happy that we still managed to have you at the festival. Like I said in the beginning, we were going to have you. We were going to watch your film in the movie theater with the audiences. We were going to have you as our guest in person and to have those discussions. However, the world has turned upside down, and so we all have to make sure that we remain safe. That's our number one priority right now. And nevertheless, we're incredibly happy that we continue to watch movies together, whichever way, and get to talk about movies. So thank you so much for finding the time to be with us and share your wonderful thoughts about your work. And I want to also remind the audiences that you should vote for Audience Award. So after each film that you watch, please rate the film, because your voice and your vote matters. And on November 1st, Sunday at 6 p.m. New York time, we will have our award ceremony. Thank you so much, Ena, once again for being with us.
Ena, stay online for a little debrief after we go offline for this. So I'd just like to remind, we didn't do that in the beginning, so that we don't disappear.
And thank you. Thank you to everyone who joined us and watched this. Keep watching.
And thanks again for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure. So I'm happy we could do this online.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That there were no glitches, internet glitches and other things.
Thank you all. And thank you all for joining us. And as Diana said, do not forget to put in your vote, your audience vote. And also, if you can vote on November 3rd, don't forget to vote on November 3rd too, because this is an important one.
And also in Bosnia, what is the Bosnian?
November 15th, I believe, are the Bosnian.
Yes.
If we have currently people watching us from Bosnia, vote. We all need to vote. That's just the beginning. It may not solve all of our problems, but it's a good start at least. So thank you all.